Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Project Flux podcast. Today on the spotlight, we have Michael LaPage. Michael is the Chief Learning Officer at planacademy.com, and I was lucky enough to meet Michael. We were just reminiscing probably 2 or 3 years ago now at a Project Connect event in London, and I've been meaning to get him on ever since. So it's only taken, 2 years, but we got there eventually. So thank you so much for coming on, Michael. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Nice to see you, James. Nice to see you, Yoshi.
And you're calling in from Canada, right?
I am. Yeah, I'm near Toronto. I'm in Hamilton, Ontario, which is a former big steel company, a big steel city. But yeah, that's where I am.
Excellent. And cold or warm at the moment out there?
We're bleeding into fall, so mornings are cool, but the days are still warm. There's no snow yet. There's no snow yet.
I think we're there. We never get snow. We just go from slightly wet to more wet in the UK, but there we go.
That's fair.
But listen, we always like to start by finding out what's on people's minds, because there's so much going on in both the projects world and the AI world. And it doesn't seem like there's a week that goes past without some kind of innovation or something that looks like it's going to move the dial. So what's the thing that you've read about or you're thinking about when it comes to AI and project controls?
Yeah, this is going to be right from the start. It's going to be a tough question to answer, and I'm going to be transparent with you from the start. I'm excited. I'm somewhat excited about AI. I think this is incredibly cool technology. I think it's here to stay. It's displacing, disrupting like we've seen other technologies do. But man, is there a buzz about it that it is going to solve all of our problems? So I feel a little bit conflicted about the topic of AI in general.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just be upfront from the start.
No, good. That's what we want. We want varied opinions, Michael, because, we come at it from a very kind of proponent view. But even us, I think, sometimes get overwhelmed by the hype. So what makes you say that? Is there anything behind that? Or is it just a kind of feel that things are being overblown?
Yeah. It is hard to filter out the signal from the noise, I think, in the marketplace in general. Like, I'm a business owner. All of the tools that I use to run my business, every one of them now has some sort of AI co-pilot. Let's call it a co-pilot or some sort of AI piece. Personally, I think companies are feeling a lot of pressure to jump on this bandwagon so that they can be competitive. If you're a big tool in the marketplace and you don't have some sort of AI piece, then maybe you're going to, other companies are not going to go with you. So it is really hard for me to filter out, like, do I care that there's AI in my inbox, in my Gmail now? Do I really care? Like, is it really changing my life? I can't write emails. Like, that's a little bit of what I'm feeling about this is, I don't think the way I use email is going to be completely revolutionized by AI. So, and there's a lot of hype around that. And it's hard, like I said, it's hard to figure out where I should be interested and where I shouldn't be interested, because it is everywhere, man. Everywhere.
Yeah. And I think it's really good to have this conversation because people do feel pressure to keep up, and we're getting lots of companies throwing money at the problem just to say they're doing AI. And I think in the short term, there is certainly at least some projects that are showing to fail. So there was a recent MIT study that showed that most AI investments fail. To me, that doesn't mean AI is not going to be important, but it's that old hype bubble where you get the hype and then you get the reality check. And I think we're kind of there. I think we've had the hype for the last few years. People are feeling the reality now, but then it will start building again to something genuinely useful. And I think the distinction between genuinely useful use cases of AI and just something to say, I'm doing AI, is getting blurred a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm feeling. Sorry, I got my dog here. Can you go lie down?
That's all right. You can come on the show. What's your dog's name?
My dog's name is Snickers. If she came on the show, she'll steal the show. She's so adorably cute. She's a
what does she think about AI? That's the important question.
I don't think she does think too much about it. Yeah. I'll just say one of the areas I feel this in particular is when I go to conferences. We go to we're in project controls world, and we go to conferences mainly to network but also to feel the trends, feel what's going on in the industry, start seeing the trends. But for the last year or two, these conferences are just inundated with AI topics, AI discussions. And, I get it. I understand it. This is exciting. There's something that is new happening here. People do want to understand it and figure out whether it's worth paying attention to. But I also feel like, for me, I'll just kind of tell you my thesis is that like I'm a people person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in the training business, and training is really about people, helping people grow, helping people learn, helping people be effective. And I somewhat feel like there's so much hype about AI that we are forgetting the people side of, let's talk about it in construction. We're forgetting the people side of construction,
Mm-hmm.
of our software platforms or of project management. We're deep in scheduling over here, project controls, but like, I don't hear anybody talking about people stuff. And I think that's a big gap that we're missing. Again, it's interesting. There's a real push to talk about how we're innovating and all these tools. But I mean, in general, we know that construction and related industries, I want to include that as well, because it's not just, construction,
Yeah,
but these are businesses that rely on relationships. Like
of
stuff
course.
doesn't get done without relationships. So I think for me, that's kind of what I'm feeling is like there's a real bubble. And also think that maybe there's some sort of expectation that AI is going to solve all of the problems that we have in, our industry, for example. And I'm just not buying it.
I think
I'm
it's
not buying it.
what
Deeply
I'm hearing.
skeptical.
Well, and I think we have to be, because how many technology have we seen where the bubble has burst? You've only got to go back to the internet. Boom, there was a bit of a burst there. But then what tends to happen is after it bursts, it builds up more organically again. And I think that's probably what will happen is there'll be some kind of a bubble burst, and then it will be more organic. Interesting that you talk about the human relationship, because more and more people we've had on this show, and Josh, you jump in when you want, are now talking about the fact that the great promise that they see with AI is that it's going to take away the grunt work that we have to do, therefore giving us more time to be human. And that actually one of the skills that we're going to have to develop more is around emotional intelligence, around actually communication and talking to people. And if we get that right, that's not a bad thing. If we can make AI work for us so that we can spend more time on connections, then surely that's a good thing.
Absolutely, that's a good thing. But again, I think that goes back to what I said before is like, we think that AI is going to clear up our schedules so that we're going to focus on the humanness. I don't think that's going to happen. I think what we've created is a grand distraction. We've created another outlet that keeps our brains deeply engaged. Doesn't, there's nothing pushing us towards more human interactions. There's only things pulling us away from them.
Mhm.
And AI is one of them. It's, my wife is a therapist, just so you know. So
Yeah.
and, in the therapeutic world, there's a lot of ways AI could be replacing therapists. Not necessarily replacing therapists, but it could do some low level therapy if you want. That's okay. Maybe that gets you through the day. What I think happens though is we start to think systems like this they're easy to access. There's no barriers, right? There's no barriers to get into to have a discussion with a chat thing. It's on your phone, and now it's going to be embedded in every app. You can
Mm.
deeply immerse yourself in it. There's a barrier to actually talking to the person who's sitting next to you in the office. Well, you might not even be in the office because
Mm.
we've eroded those things as well. So again, I'm not buying it that it's going to push us towards more relationship building. I think it's going to distract us.
Okay, interesting. I mean, it reminds me, the thing that was going through my head when you were saying that was, I don't know if you've seen the South Park episodes with the sycophantic AI and the guy's talking to his chatbot and it agrees with everything he says. And I think there is definitely a danger with that. And I am conflicted, I'll be honest. I use AI a lot. And sometimes I do kind of catch myself saying, you know what, I should really stop talking to the AI and talk to a person. I don't know if you got similar feelings, Yoshi, or you got any.
I mean, there's definitely the argument because there's the argument that using AI won't help us communicate with others. I mean, you can even go further and say people who use AI, who are power users of AI, might actually pick up habits from AI where they struggle to speak to other people as a result of it. So you get like AI mania, for instance. So there's that. There's also that sort of issue where it's not just a negation, but it's also an issue. It becomes a problem. So David, I know you mentioned, because you mentioned something around, you see AI in a lot of different tools, and I guess my first question to you is, does it feel forced? In it being forced, sometimes I try to understand, is it because of the hype they're forced into these products? But also, is it because of that low barrier to entry? If I was Microsoft and Google, by putting it in all of my products, I can see organically which behaviors emerge where people are actually using the AI and then pull it away from the products that it's not being used for. Because you can also look at it in that way. They're just putting the feelers out almost, as opposed to just following the hype. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think maybe it hasn't been around in all these apps yet to really make a decision on that, or really to make a judgment on whether, it'll stick around in these apps.
Mm.
But, should we be concerned? Again, we're diverging a little bit from our construction focused topics, but should we be concerned that, Google, for example, is going to embed an AI in every calendar, Gmail, G Drive thing? My concern again is sort of around like we're the data, we're the product, right? Capturing our data, capturing our behaviors. I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but
Mm-hmm.
somewhere in here there is an ethical line. I'm not sure where it is. It's really big and gray, but
Yeah. Yeah, it sure
maybe you
is.
can see over here. I've got a piano, right? And
Yeah.
back here I've got a guitar. I'm a
Yeah,
musician.
same here. I don't know if
Yeah,
you can see mine,
and
you know.
I think in particular, I feel concerned in the music industry where we've got AI that can just whip out hit songs.
Have you tried Suno and things like that? It's wild, isn't
No,
it?
I haven't. No, I don't want.
Don't. It's a slippery slope, Michael.
I don't want to do it. So I don't know. I think in your questions here, you're like, what podcast you like? Or I like Rick Beato on YouTube, who's a music producer that
Yeah,
talks a
yeah.
lot music at this level. And I like his thesis that, this is going to change the music industry. And I don't know that it's going to be for the better. I don't think I want to be listening to AI generated songs. Like I just don't think I want to do that. I think I want to hear somebody that worked hard to like put something together. I think that's worthwhile for me.
Well, we actually wrote a piece on that on the blog when it was about saying actually what people buy when it comes to art, whether it's music or any other creative art form. It's the story. You're buying the story. When you get into a band or wherever it may be, yes, you love the music, but you also like the story, the people
Yeah.
that are involved and the struggles they went through. You're never going to get that with AI. So I think music is safe from that. But the people that I do worry about is, let's say you're a jingle writer, right? Let's say your job is
Mhm.
to write jingles for adverts. So you're not doing anything particularly creative. You're literally just doing a job. I think those people are that job's those days are numbered, because if you're going to pay, say, a couple of £100 for a radio jingle, and you could go into Suno and get it generated for $30 a month, well, you're definitely going to go with the latter. So, yeah, I think we're in very interesting times. And we actually don't mind straying away from project delivery, because I think there's a lot of parallels. You talk about Google, and a lot of project professionals use Google. But let's move on to what you do, because planacademy.com. If you could just tell us firstly, what planacademy.com does, and then maybe talk about some of the tools, because I know you're big on Primavera, and it'll be interesting to get your view on what Primavera are doing, particularly in terms of AI as well.
Yeah, sure. I'll do my best. So Plan Academy, we're a training company with a big focus in the scheduling space. We've got training courses. A lot of them are self-paced training courses for prospective schedulers and project controls people. Big focus on P6. That's kind of where I got my start. And I really didn't expect to be 15 years later still training P6. I was like, well, this is a low-level tool that will, this should be obsolete at some point, but it's just had this incredible wave of popularity. So yeah, we train a lot on P6, but we cover lots of other topics in project controls, including, well, everything, from leadership to delay claims. We have had kind of some AI focused courses, generative AI, when we had a partnership with a company called Alice
Yes, we
that
know
we're doing
Alice.
some interesting stuff. So yeah, I think we've got a great platform on top of self-paced training courses. Once people get inside, we do live training regularly as well. So every month, almost like a webinar, I get up there, or me and some of my trainers get up there, and we take a topic that's kind of might be outside of our course or something like that. We just teach it, and we try to teach it live and invite people and see if we can ask questions, get questions answered, and support people that way. So that's kind of the gamut, and we're servicing both individuals and organizations. Organizations come to us and say, "What we want this for everybody," and we're able to. We've got some product packages that work for businesses as well.
And I think there seems to be such an appetite for training at the moment. And I think, take something like Primavera P6. I mean, like a lot of these softwares, they've become incredibly bloated over time and quite complex. So is that part of the training that you deliver? Is it trying to demystify some of these packages? Because I would imagine, similar to other programs I use, some people are only kind of skimming the surface and using maybe 10% of the features.
Yeah, I think, I think actually one of the ways I got to be a little bit of a name related to Primavera P6 was by trying to do those things, demystify. P6 is it's an old piece of software. It's been around for a long time. And if you were going to sit and design a piece of software now, you would have a whole different paradigm as to how you would go about it than they did back in the 90s when they designed P6.
Would
So
it look anything like P6?
Yeah, and it's not just UX, but there's some quirkiness to it.
Of course, yeah.
Back in the day, there were large clients. Before Primavera was purchased by Oracle, there were large clients that had a lot of clout in the industry, and they were able to influence how some of the features of the software and things like that. So there's some weird things in there where they're like, what's this? Why is this feature here? Well, historically, this large client said, we'll buy 100, we'll buy 10,000 licenses if you let it do this thing. And Primavera was like, okay, we'll do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've done well at trying to demystify and help people get savvy with that tool, because it's not straightforward. A Microsoft project would be easier to learn.
How are they utilizing AI to try and do it? Are they doing anything with it? Is there any AI features built in, or do you also think that's a bit of a
I've
hype?
seen nothing related to AI for the tool that we're talking about, Primavera P6. I haven't seen anything. It's still it's a Windows-based tool that kind of does what it does. Not to say that Oracle hasn't been busy at trying to help their clients move to a web-based version of Primavera P6. So there is something called OPC, which is Oracle Primavera Cloud. And it is it's not Primavera P6, but it has facets of Primavera P6 and additional features, and it's all web-based now. But this is the weirdness of our scheduling world. The majority of projects still run on Windows-based.
Yeah. No, we're definitely seeing that. It's fascinating, because do you think some of it is the technology and it just doesn't work? Because we were just talking about Microsoft Copilot, for instance, and then Microsoft are putting it into things like Microsoft Project, but it doesn't actually work very well. It doesn't, it seems that a lot of these AIs don't deal very well with numerical data. So whether that's Excel spreadsheets, and of course schedules are based on, it's just numerical data in kind of a graphical form. And maybe that's the issue. It's just not yielding very good results at the moment.
That could be it. I don't know. I'm not really sure. I think it's interesting you say AI doesn't do well with numerical data, but I think the thing,
or generative AI at least.
Yeah, right. I think the thing we struggle with in terms of schedules is that every schedule is its own like little canvas picture that somebody painted, right? In that there is no standard like activity description. So it's not like you find if you're excavating something, there's a standard 5 activities that you would use. So there's no consistency or standard across the industry because it's open-ended. It's a canvas. You can put whatever you want in it. So I think it's been difficult without any sort of standard that way to maybe innovate in the way an AI would be able to innovate and generate stuff, So
I think it's similar with costs, actually. The people we've talked to, no one's really cracked cost using AI in the construction industry, because there is
Mm.
no standards. That people have tried to put standards together, but the difference between the theory and the practice is very different, and so you get all these kind of anomalies that are hard to work out. But can I ask your view on some of these? There's these AI tools out in the market now. There's NPlan and there's Nodes and Link, and what's your view on those? Do you think they serve a purpose, or do you think again it's going to be a while before they become truly useful?
That's a great question, and I know both the owners of NPlan and Nodes and Links, and they're both incredibly intelligent guys with some real vision. I like both of those tools, and I bow down to their innovative prowess to put both of those tools together. I'll just be clear. So NPlan, I understand, is a tool that looks at risk in projects, so it can import a P6 schedule and leverage an existing database of existing schedules and risk data to kind of like understand where there
Yeah.
might be risks in your
That was
schedule.
their
That's
original tool,
incredible.
but they've released this new one though, which I think is really interesting, which is Schedule Studio, which is like a generative AI, and actually generates a schedule for you that you can then import, I believe, to P6 format. So it's quite interesting the
Okay.
way it works. You can
Good
upload
stuff.
your scope documents. You can upload you can give it a prompt about the context of your project. And what it does is it generates a work breakdown structure for you, which you can then amend and move about. And then and activities too. And then when you're happy with that, it'll then generate a schedule for you. So to me, that's a really interesting innovation in the space.
Yeah. Okay. I haven't seen that update yet from them. So what are the challenges with that? Let's think it through. I'm going to tell you, when we do training, especially in the construction space, there's two sides of the house. There's the owner side and the contractor side, right? The contractor's got to generate those schedules, and those schedules are going to be absolutely torn apart by the owner side. The owner side scrutinizes every single detail in those schedules. So I think one of the challenges we have with AI is actually on the owner side. My sense is there's a bit of a distrust of some of these tools. And it's a healthy distrust. It's not a distrust that the tools don't do what they say they do. It's more the distrust that by turning it over to a tool, we might miss something, or we don't understand it. We don't take the time to actually, go through it with our own fine tooth comb and our own brains. We don't fully understand that schedule. And how can I go to the owner and say, there's these risks if I haven't done my diligence? That's the sense I get when I've got some good buddies that work for owner consultants. That's my sense. More than a few of them have said, we don't use any tools. We don't go and put them through Deltek, Acumen, Fuse, which again has been around for forever. Or we might do it to at a very high level, but that's not the output we produce and send over to the owner as our report. We take the time to go through it manually. Mm-hmm. I've heard that more than a couple of times in talking to owner consultants. They are reluctant to put their reputation on the line with a tool.
Yeah.
So that's one thing.
It's a very valid point. And it's something that we say a lot, is that AI cannot replace your human judgment. And even if you are using an AI tool, you have to own both the prompt, what you're asking it to, and the output. And you've got to understand the output, because at some point you've got to explain that output to somebody, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right. So I think that, that is one of the challenges that AI has, is that if we can just quickly input a schedule into some sort of AI engine and we get this critical analysis, do we trust it? Do we trust it and turn it over and say, this is ours? Do we have our own understanding of the project? Like, I think we are, if we go that way, we are actually losing our own ability to do that critical analysis ourselves. And I think it's important. I think it's important to not lose that ability to really understand that side of things. So again, some weird gray area, right? That
it's all gray.
We'll have to figure out. So I think that's one thing on the generative AI side. So if we're now talking about on the contractor side and we're using a generative AI to build our schedules, I think there's also a similar challenge of like, we can generate it, but of course we need to take the time to really scrutinize it and question it. Is this the right output that mirrors what we're trying to build, mirrors our productivity, mirrors the risks that we're facing, and I would assume that any contractor that's doing a generative AI would take the time to do that kind of scrutiny.
You'd hope.
It begs the question too, is like, or could you just build it yourself because you're going to you're going to scrutinize it anyways? Like, why not just build it yourself? I don't know. So I don't have all the answers, but I know these are things that people think about and will have challenges.
I think it kind of leads me to my thinking. So you're right. You need someone to take ownership of the output, but might it change the model in construction where at the moment, if you're an employer, you employ a bunch of consultants to do your checking and your project management.
Mm-hmm.
But in theory, if they've got these tools and they get to the point that they can significantly reduce the time invested, that rather than having to employ 5 or 6 different consultants for 5 or 6 different jobs, they could have one person that they employ internally to use the tools as agents to do that. So it will change the model. Whilst I accept what you say, you still need someone to check it. It starts changing the whole flow and the way that we actually go about contracting work out to consultants in particular rather than contractors. Do you know what I mean, Yoshi? I'm not sure if I explained that correctly.
No, I guess, yeah, I guess the dynamic of how you use AI to support what you do, as opposed to giving it to the AI to one-shot your data and give you insights, I think it's quite a powerful thing. I think for me, I mean, Michael, you mentioned risk, so managing risk as a scheduler. But how do you, from a scheduler's perspective, deal with uncertainty? Because when you have an AI, you can do some cluster algorithm or something to understand the hidden patterns of data and then work with that to see what patterns there might be. So, from a bottoms up perspective, because you don't, I mean, as an uncertainty is an unknown, right? So you don't know what you're looking at. From an expert's perspective in scheduling, moving beyond risk, how do you deal with uncertainty? Because it seems a lot clearer for an AI to, I guess, identify uncertainty to some extent than it is for a human, I'd imagine, or at least at a quicker amount of time, because you're just looking at the data and see what patterns emerge.
Well, that's a really great question. In general, the way we build schedules, the waterfall method of like building the whole project schedule up front is fraught with uncertainty. We have no clue what's going to happen in the last half of the project, depending on the length. So there's lots of uncertainty. There's a great, I don't have the book here, do I? There's a great book out, building how big things get built.
Yeah, is that the Ben Fluvier one?
Could be. Yes, I think so.
Yeah, but interesting book.
And maybe Dan Gardner, might be your namesake.
Okay.
I might have that wrong, but how big things get built. The authors really hit home with this idea that, pointing to lots of research, that humans, when we estimate things, we do a crap job. We just do. We overestimate all the time. And they've got all the project data to show, how optimistically we estimated things and how things turned out. So this should be like, whatever that paradigm is, that should be taught way more. Like, we should really understand that. We should really understand how, as humans, our estimates are not based in reality. They're just not. They're not based on science. They're based on gut feel, or they're based on our brain really thinking optimistically for these great, outcomes, and not being able to see the pessimistic out. So I think if AI can help us solve that, that's where I think we're going to see some real gains. But the other side of it is that, this is weird, but it's all the human behavior of this stuff. It's like, nobody wants to see a super pessimistic,
Tell me what I want to hear.
Nobody wants to think about how everything's going to go left. They want to think about how this is going to be a success for everybody. So there's a lot of human behavior in estimating and building schedules. There's a lot of our own biases in there. Maybe AI can help us face that better.
So this is the bit here where I was just saying, James, quickly, because, the communication element in construction, I agree with, right? I think there's so much nuance in the way we speak to people to get things done effectively, which AI can't quite capture. But just touching on James's point earlier in terms of how you can use an AI to, derive more insights from the AI itself, from the information you've seen is, I agree with you again. I think, people who are schedulers need to hone their skill set and their experience in scheduling and estimating effectively. Once you kind of have that view of, what you think might happen. Here are some of our risks. And, this is how things have played out before. When you were to then go to a generative AI element or any sort of AI who's managing and giving you insights on your schedule, you can relay that information to the AI. So when it's doing its analysis from a bottoms up angle, saying, here's the hidden patterns of data, it now has some meaning as to what that data is, as opposed to it just saying, here are two things which might relate to each other. So I think that combination can be useful. It's just a matter of wedding those two things together effectively, which I think hasn't quite been done as such.
I think
Yeah, it's a good point.
the book is actually, but we were both right, Michael. It was Dan Gardner and Ben Flubier together.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
and
great.
he's a big proponent of the reference class forecasting, which is all around optimism bias. But I think where AI could be really useful is, despite reference class forecasting and optimism bias, projects are still over budget and they're still wrong and they're still late. Where I see a use case for AI is where we take out the human from it. So we get the AI, as Yoshi was just saying, can understand the context and give an unfiltered, unbiased view. The problem is you would always get some, long in the tooth project managers saying, I know better than the AI because I've been in this industry for 30 years, therefore I know everything, despite the fact that every single one of their projects has been late. So if we can, I've heard some organizations actually starting to appoint AI to the board, which I think is a really interesting thing. You're actually
Wow.
taking AI's view as a board member, and they've obviously got the unfiltered version. And the beauty of these large language models is they can obviously review and understand far more data than humans can. So I think that's quite a novel way of approaching it as well.
But James, your point still stands. I mean, you said earlier, in a conversation that we had about, with AI, its outputs can't be held accountable, therefore it cannot make decisions. I guess at that
Yet.
board level, yet. But I
Yes,
guess
I
at
said
that
yet.
board level, there's that level of caution. How much influence does it have on our decision making?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
But
it's
do
like
you
an
think,
advisor.
as an advisor, exactly, there was a crazy story from somebody who had on the podcast where he actually developed a board of advisors for his life, and in his board of advisors, he had, you'll have to remind me, Yoshi, but it was Steve Jobs, who was only to advise him on tech matters, but not to advise him on anything to do with how to raise a family. Gandhi as his spiritual guide, Einstein as obviously the intelligence,
Yeah.
and then he had some pretty cool people on his board, like his future self and his departed father. It was like really, really cool. And it's things like that, I think, are the things that we're misinterpreting with AI at the moment. I kind of agree with you that, just trying to AIify, for want of a better word, an existing process is only going to get you so far. I think where it will change things is where it does things like that, where it comes up with a totally novel way of approaching an issue. And who knows what that's going to be? In scheduling, I'm sure we've even thought about how it's going to impact things, but it's exciting.
I'll give you that. And it's, for me, I think it's going to be about how we, like it comes back to somehow the humanness of how projects get done, because, obviously there's a problem. Projects are delivered late, right? Or over budget. But somehow it's okay though. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're still doing projects. We all know that most projects are late and over budget, but we're still going to build things so as
Yeah, but
much
they're
as I
only
think,
late and over budget because it wasn't the right estimate, or do you know what I mean? A lot of the time estimates go through politically to make the project go, not necessarily that that's the
exactly.
right budget.
Yes, exactly. Like, it's complicated on the other side of, like, if I estimate something and put it in front of you, your acceptance of it has something to do with what's on the page, but something to do about our relationship or the climate, or like there's more forces at play than just here's some data, whether you accept that data or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The politics, as you mentioned, the politics of the situation, who's involved, how long we've done business together, or what, all these things all play a part. So
Yeah. And then there's always the black swan events, which, even though they're black swan events, if you go through a long enough time period, there's always something that happens, right? So when we do projects, they're often quite long. So it's one of those things you say, oh, what's the likelihood of COVID striking? Well, very little. But if your project is like 6 years from inception to completion, the chance of something happening in that time frame is quite big, actually. But we just assume that on the constituent parts, it's so unlikely that it's not going to happen, so we don't build anything in. So there's a lot of that going on as well.
That is interesting because so we're saying that some projects, get pushed through the business case and, go are viable and are delivered because of certain political grounds or other systemic components. So then we're using AI to try and fix our prediction, but then it's like it was set up to fail anyway. Well, it was set up to fail for the AI anyway in that sense. So it's kind of like, well, is the AI the solution because it's not solving what it was intended to solve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the premise that risk management's probably a bit broken and we need to find a different way of approaching it.
Cultural.
I think it goes to the fact of like, we're spending a lot of time trying to optimize the data,
Yeah.
but I think my point is that data's part of it, but like in building things, data is only a part of
Yeah,
how things get built.
Yes.
There's a lot of other factors,
absolutely.
and a lot of them I think are human. So
Absolutely.
that's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Michael, just before we finish, we always like to ask some kind of more personal questions about you. If I can ask, if you weren't in project controls or education, what do you think you'd be doing instead? I saw the guitars behind you, so I wonder if that's going to play a part.
Yeah, that's kind of my pastime.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. I think I have a real interest in, and it's coming out here in the things that I've said, but like I have a real interest in human dynamics and understanding how that goes. Personally, I've been in therapy for years and have worked with a therapist. For me, and my wife's a therapist, so like a lot of my conversations outside of project controls end up taught in this kind of like human dynamics vein. So I think I would really, and I'm actually considering starting this softly as a side hustle, but I would really be interested in doing some coaching or for entrepreneurs, I think
Mm.
coaching, advising, something like that. I think for myself, I can speak about this for myself is like we also sometimes make this divide of like, oh, that's my personal life, that's my business life, and
Yeah.
it's not a clear divide. You
It's definitely
bring
not.
your stuff, whatever it is, your dysfunctions into your business, and
And vice versa.
we think we can solve it with money and software tools and better people and stuff like that. So that's not always the case either. So I have a real interest in that kind of like human dynamics. I wouldn't call it exactly therapy, but like in that world. And so I think if
Yeah.
I wasn't doing project controls, I would be moving more in that direction.
That's probably why you're such a good trainer, because it's around that connection and, at the end of the day, you're speaking to people. What one other question before we close up. What's one belief you've changed your mind about in the last few years, Michael?
Okay. This is gonna be an interesting one too. But I have a
That's
son.
all
He's
right.
17, and he has gotten involved in a Christian organization. I was raised Catholic, and my wife grew up in a pretty strict kind of Christian situation as well. We've both kind of let our Christian paths go, if you want, and
Hmm.
been more spiritual, if you
Yeah.
want. And so when my son started to get involved in this Christian organization, I actually really got really concerned because
Okay. Interesting.
there's some, there's some pretty critical beliefs
Hmm.
in different sects of Christianity that don't align with me or don't align with us. But as my son's been working more and more in it, I really have the belief I think I've changed about it is that there's such a community
Yeah.
feel that is almost, you can't find it almost anywhere else,
Yeah.
which I find is really interesting. Um,
I think we've lost a lot of that in Western society, actually.
yeah, and I even think back to when I was my wife and I were new in our marriage, we were going to church and even just thinking about the support we got from the community that we were in then, or just like, oh, you're having a baby and people just show up and make you meals and things like that. That's the kind of thing that we miss.
Yeah.
We're missing this kind of like, I think Christians do it because let me not label everybody Christian. Sorry. I think some people do it because it's part of their faith system. I would love for us to do it regardless of faith system,
Because,
to really,
yeah.
But
just because.
this
Yeah.
is what Yuval Harari kind of mentioned, and what drove the cognitive revolution was that we had, Homo sapiens had a shared belief, and that's how we were able to maintain, so many lines of communication and relationships because of that shared belief, and just having that as in Christianity, you see it manifest physically in everything that you might typically do. So I think losing that, we become very individualistic. So we
Yes.
lose that connection to people. So having that shared belief, emanates into your
This is not normal, right? The way that we live in the West, for thousands of years, we've lived in communities, whether it was a religious community or a spiritual community, but the human beings have always lived in communities. This is abnormal, the way that we live so isolated. So you're not the first person I've spoken to, Michael, who've kind of come back to the idea of some kind of community. And it doesn't have to be religious. I think the whole point of having someone around who's there for you is actually really, really important. And going into nicely kind of linking it to AI, going into an AI world, right? The isolation could be worse. So it's the counterweight to this kind of AI world we're going into. So that's a really interesting bit of information. And as I said, I'm hearing more and more people say the exact same thing. Michael, we've come to the end of the podcast, would you believe? It's been such a fascinating conversation. And your views have really been interesting. I think there's a lot there, certainly for me, to chew on, and things that I hadn't thought about before, which is always great when we interview somebody who challenges some of our thoughts. Where can people find out more about you and Plan Academy, Michael? We'll, of course, put it on the show notes, but your chance to give yourself a little plug there.
Well, obviously, there's planacademy.com. You can check out our blog. We blog regularly. Probably I would point you to our YouTube channel as well, Plan Academy's YouTube channel. We are constantly making content around scheduling, around leadership as well. So trying to break into some of these other areas. Those are probably be the best places to find us and connect with us.
Brilliant. So everyone check that out. We'll put it in the show notes. And Michael, thank you. It was well worth the wait to get you on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
This was a great experience for me as well. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Good. Thank you so much. Take care.
Okay. Take care, guys.
Project Flux is here.
That's a wrap for today's episode. But before you go, exciting news. Project Flux is teaming up with Project Management Global to bring you the latest in AI-driven project delivery and essential management insights. Through this partnership, expect weekly AI insights, practical tools, and expert thought leadership, ensuring you stay ahead in the evolving project landscape. Stay tuned for exclusive content, joint research, and strategies to supercharge your project outcomes. You can learn more at www.pm-global.co.uk and be part of the future of project management. See you later.
Project Flux is here.
Just want to give a big shout out to our sponsors, Construct AI. For anyone interested in looking at Construct AI, the link's in our show notes. There's a free tier that you can play around with. Yoshi and I have been using it for a good year since it was originally launched, and we get a huge amount of value out of it. So I thoroughly encourage everyone to go onto the Construct AI site and have a play around.
Cool. And guys, before we sign off, please don't forget to share, follow, and like all of our stuff. So that helps us to engage with you and understand a bit more about what you want so we can bring it to your doorstep as early as possible.
See you later, everyone.